the price of the Bitcoin is not what matters. It's the adoption and it's all the infrastructure that comes on the back of that. So we can expect much more price volatility in Bitcoin, but what we're talking about here is decentralized finance. This is the infrastructure, the building blocks of your future relationship with money. And let's be honest here, money and your relationship with money, it affects every single part of your life. Every single daily activity has some type of transaction to it. And if we can find a way to decentralize it, it's literally going to change the way that you live your life. And I want to play a couple more clips from you. I want to play one more from Andreas because he's got an incredible way of articulating how this stuff makes a difference to actually our humanity and our lives and our freedoms. And that's why I've been talking about cryptocurrencies and DeFi in some way, shape, or form for the past 8 years on London Real, because it's about freedom and it's about how we can live our lives in a freer way, and how we can really control our assets and our money, as opposed to that being controlled by governments, by corporations, by all sorts of other laws and protocols that aren't always in our best interest. And so I want to play this last clip, and this is Andreas explaining what happens when you decentralize finance? Because there's 6 billion people in the world right now that don't have access to finance. They aren't able to be able to pick up the phone and buy a stock or trade foreign exchange in Tokyo, or get a loan for their car. There are people out there that don't have any finance whatsoever. Imagine if we could give them access to these markets. Imagine if every single one of these billions of people could get microloans, could get insurance contracts, should be able to borrow, to lend, all of these things. It would cause a rate of growth that's almost hard to fathom. And this is Andreas going a bit deeper of how Bitcoin and DeFi is going to change the world.
It all goes back to this fundamental question. We live on a planet with 7.5 billion people, and 2 to 4 billion people are completely cut off from finance, and almost 5 to 6 billion people are cut off from international finance. What happens to the world economy when you bring 6 billion new people online, people who are productive but disconnected? What happens to their lives? What happens to poverty across the world when you can extend financial services, opportunity, credit, liquidity? Like, even if you're in a developed nation today, where can you invest your money? Nowhere. There is nothing you can invest money in today. The real estate market is a huge bubble. You can't buy cars because that's a huge bubble. Student loans are a bubble in the US now, right? There are no investment outlets because nothing is productive. What about if you're investing in 1 billion people who are in poverty? And I could take £1,000, split it into 1,000 microloans, and join together with 1 million investors to fund those microloans. What happens then? Direct, no banks, no intermediaries, no overheads, no costs. Direct funding, developed world to developing world, person to person. From my smartphone in Trafalgar Square to a Kenyan farmer's text messaging phone, which they can then use to buy seed, or stock up a small store, or start a sewing business, or buy a scooter and use it as a taxi service for a rural environment. That is where Bitcoin's possibility really is. The reason we cannot extend financial services to the rest of the world is not because they don't have money. It's not because they don't have productive potential. It's because banking, as a series of brick and mortar, high overhead, high margin services, is not scalable. But banking as an app backed by a network-based currency and system of trust scales enormously, and it can be extended into the most remote areas.
I love watching and listening to these videos because Andreas is predicting what has now happened in decentralized finance. And when he's talking about that Kenyan farmer, it's not that they don't have money. It's not that they don't have productive capacity, but they lack access to finance. And that stops them from growing at a rate that they could be. Imagine you or me walking down Trafalgar Square or Times Square in New York City and being able to do a microloan to some farmer there or some other individual in a rural environment and allow them to grow that capital at an incredible exponential rate without having the gatekeepers of the banking industry and the governments getting in our way. It's so exciting. And I feel so fortunate to be able to have been on the ground floor with so much of this education over the past 8 years of London Real, because this is ultimately about freedoms. And that's why I'm so excited to talk more about DeFi today and the next steps, and why it's so important that you get involved in this market now, because it is going to change your life and you can be involved in the ground floor and be a part of the building of this infrastructure.